Sunnylands will become a place where leaders of the world, whether it's in government or in philanthropy or the arts or education, will be able to come to make contributions and arrive at accords that make this a better planet.
That it's a great privilege for me to welcome all of you back. We've had a number of new additions to the party. Some people had to come and go, but it's been a very interesting morning. And personally, I have to say that it's a privilege for me to have had all of you join me for the launch of our first commission event. As I said, this is our 98th day in operation since we put the program in place on the 20th of February. And we've got a policy working group in Washington, D.C., an advisory group. And Prime Minister Moore and President Toledo have both just agreed to be part of our advisory board, and I very much appreciate that. You got clearance on that, Mike, didn't you? Yeah, sort of. Yeah, exactly. Well, I asked you before. You said you were going to ask. One of the things I've always learned is it's better to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. It's one of the great lessons in life. So, and let me say that as we wrap up this program, I do want to take just a moment, since we do have a number of people who were not here earlier, to basically outline for you what it is that we as a commission are doing. Walter Annenberg had this amazing ability, and he had this ability to what I describe as touch the future. And I said to Chris Sabatini, and I said earlier today, that David Rockefeller, who launched the Council of the Americas, we're here unveiling America's Quarterly, this great publication, to this day, at 97 years of age, has that same ability, the ability to reach out and touch the future. Well, one of the things that happened was that Walter Annenberg, in a discussion that we had decades ago, made it very clear that he believed that the future was on the Pacific. And he was particularly proud of the fact that Sunnylands, this spectacular retreat, 240 acres in Rancho Mirage, California, is a place where nearly every president of the United States has visited since Dwight D. Eisenhower. And in light of that, there is, I think, a responsibility that we all have. And Walter said to me that he hoped that I would play a role in the future to ensure that Sunnylands would not only be the Camp David of the West, but it would be a place that would spend its time focused on the Pacific Rim. Now, the reason I say he was such a visionary is that at that time he obviously did not know that as we sit here in 2013, nearly two-thirds, actually, of the global gross domestic product and nearly two-thirds of the global population is around the Pacific. And it clearly is the wave of the future. And what we're seeing with the Trans-Pacific Partnership and a wide range of other entities being put into place to bridge this gap, we are, I believe, going to play a major role in enhancing the standard of living and the quality of life for the people in Latin America, in Asia, and throughout the rest of the greater Pacific. Now, I've said that the goal of our commission is very simple, and that is to improve the human condition by encouraging the free flow of goods, services, capital, information, ideas, and people throughout the greater Pacific. And I believe that in so doing, addressing critical issues like human rights, we were talking earlier about child trafficking, environmental quality, all of these issues are best addressed if we are able to enhance the standard of living and the quality of life for people, dealing with poverty. And when one looks at the juxtaposition of where we were 3 decades ago with the problems that existed throughout Latin America and other parts of this hemisphere, and as Mike Moore said so well earlier today, if you look at the situation that existed in the greater Pacific, it is like night and day. Well, this work is going to continue, and it's going to continue with the support and encouragement of so many of you. And I've got to say that it's a great honor for me to welcome Alejandro Toledo as the luncheon speaker today. He is someone who, as Chris Sabatini said, came from abject poverty to gain a Stanford PhD and obviously be the very successful president of Peru. One of the things that really struck me about President Toledo when we first were together in the early part of the last decade is that he was able to work with President Bush, and he was just describing to me how he brought together the Andean leaders that included the likes of Hugo Chavez of Venezuela, Evo Morales of Bolivia, and they talked about whether or not they were going to pursue this kind of agreement with the United States of America. And they all, you can guess Hugo Chavez was less than enthusiastic in this quest to bring together an agreement with the United States of America because of his virulent opposition. And so courageously, President Toledo in 2002 said, fellas, I'm going it alone. I have to make sure that the people of Peru can put food on the table. I want to make sure that I create jobs in my country. And I just told President Toledo that he did the best thing for the people of all of the Andean countries by taking that lead. Now, it's taken a long time, but we talked earlier about the Colombia Agreement. That took even longer to put into place. And I won't tell you about the passion that President Toledo just showed me and what happened on the Colombia Agreement in the place where I used to serve back in Washington. But he felt very strongly about the slowdown that took place there. But I will say that the leadership that was shown by President Toledo and his country has played a big role in enhancing the entire South American continent's economic future and all of the other issues that relate to that. Now, I have had the chance to introduce earlier the executive director of the Inter-American Development Bank, the United States representative, and I'm very pleased. He's a very, very close friend of President Toledo's, and I'm very pleased to welcome Gustavo Arnavat, who is going to officially introduce President Toledo. Thank you.
Not sure there's anything else I can say or add. Well, good afternoon. And I want to begin by thanking the Council of the Americas and the Annenberg-Dreier Commission for organizing today's symposium. I also want to thank the Americas Quarterly and its publisher, Chris Sabatini, for the invitation to attend, and also to congratulate him on the launching of the latest edition, which is, of course, the focus of our gathering. As was evident by the discussions of this morning, the topics at hand are not only timely, but also critical to the successful stewardship of our hemispheric relations in our shared future. Now, I use the term shared because we no longer live in a world where the U.S. can or should even try to dictate the terms of that future. Instead, while adhering to our principles and always advocating for that which is in our best national interest, we need to find common ground with our neighbors and ways to collaborate that embrace our joint economic and strategic security. I was fortunate enough to be in San Jose, Costa Rica a couple of weeks ago with the President of the United States when he was visiting with fellow members from leaders from the region. And the focus of that visit was squarely on engaging the private sector as well as the political leaders on opportunities for jointly growing our economies. But this requires a leadership within the region that is willing to engage even more with the United States, not because of the negative consequences of failing to do so, but because of the opportunities implied actually that are obvious in stronger bilateral and multilateral relations. And from my vantage point as the representative of the United States at the IDB, and working very closely with representatives of 26 borrowing countries from Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as work that I do closely with counterparts at the White House, the National Security Council, State Department, Commerce, and Treasury, I think I'm beginning to see points of convergence where more needs to be done. So it is in this context that it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, former President of Peru, Alejandro Toledo. Now, Alejandro just flew in from Peru. Most of us would be very tired, but I am told that presidents are not allowed to be tired. So that should be not a problem. I had the privilege of meeting and spending a few days with Alejandro in the summer of 2010 at the Aspen Institute, the Ideas Festival, which had a track in Latin America a few years ago. And then we went together to the Biennial of the Americas in Denver, Colorado. And he was there in his capacity as the founder and president of the Global Center for Development and Democracy, whose mission is to promote sustainable democracies and economic self-sufficiency in developing countries by building a better understanding of poverty, social inequality, and historical imbalances in disadvantaged regions, and by crafting and implementing practical solutions to promote the well-being of individuals, particularly women, in economically disenfranchised communities throughout the world. The center notably includes in its International Advisory Council almost 24 former presidents of countries throughout Latin America and the Caribbean who enrich its programming. President Toledo was elected president of Peru in 2001, becoming the first Peruvian president of indigenous descent to be democratically elected. During his term, he focused on promoting socially inclusive growth and fighting poverty through investments in healthcare and education. Over the course of his 5 years in office, extreme poverty was reduced by 25%, and the economy grew at an average of 6% per year, making it one of the fastest growing economies in Latin America. He has a BA in Economics and Business Administration from the University of San Francisco and several advanced degrees, including a PhD in the Economics of Human Resources from Stanford University, which I'm told is a school somewhere north of in the state here. Following his tenure as president, he returned to Stanford, became a distinguished fellow in residence at the University Center for Advanced Study in Behavioral Sciences, and a paying distinguished visiting lecturer at the Freeman Spogli Institute Center on Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law. President Toledo has also been a visiting scholar at Harvard University, a distinguished visiting scholar at the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins University, and a non-resident fellow in Foreign Policy and Global Economy and Development at the Brookings Institution. He is an active member of the editorial board, as we heard earlier today, of the Americas Quarterly, the Council's flagship policy journal, and the only magazine dedicated exclusively to policy analysis and debate of economics, finance, social development, and politics in the Western Hemisphere. Now, all of these accomplishments and accolades are impressive enough, but there's one more I wish to add, which is, because of those accomplishments and accolades, is especially impressive. He's also a very nice guy. So without any further ado, here's President Toledo.
Chairman David Dieter of the Annenberg-Dreier Commission at Sunnylands. My friend Gustavo, thank you very much for your generous words. I'm just an Indian enslaved who thought that once I concluded my presidency, I was going to be free and I was going to rest. I was dead wrong. Congratulations on the mission of the Annenberg-Dreier Commission. Congratulations on this American Quarterly. I saw it when I was born. I've been following it, and in each issue, I read it an enormous improvement. Chris, congratulations. It's an honor that you make me when you ask me to be member of this board. I promise you I won't charge you anything. My friends, let me get to the theme. The world is shrinking. And despite the distance Whether we want it or not, we are getting closer and closer. And to touch the future, it's better to do it now. The future is not tomorrow. We need to touch it now. There is a recomposition of the economic, trade, military power in the world. We have to admit that. And it's better to think, and that's why I congratulate it, to think now, how could we put it an aggregate value at that relationship? How can we anticipate how we're going to deal with the Asia Pacific? APEC, in which I participated for 5 years, it's 54% of the world economy, 56% of the world trade. The world is changing. So it's better that we begin to think the future. How do we deal each other? Let's not make the mistake that we had made with Cuba. Let's resolve the problem. I come today with a very optimistic proposition to you about Latin America and its role in the world. And I'm responsible for that optimistic proposition, but at the same time, I need to anticipate you that demands an enormous challenges. Never in the history of Latin America before, the region has in its hands the unique opportunity. Never in the history of Latin America. The region has had in its hand the enormous opportunity of making a qualitative leap forward and play a crucial role in the world economy and in the challenge of sustainable development. Never before. We have almost everything. The region, in order to crystallize this opportunity and not miss the train, need to have the courage to meet those challenges, to establish benchmarks, and to look at the future. The synergy between the natural resources and the human capital are very powerful. I will show you some numbers. I'm going to try to do as fast as I can. Ask you, please forgive me. I'm going to go very fast because I want to have some time for interaction. Latin America has been growing the last 13 years at an average of 5%. Average. Despite some outliers. Some countries, such as Peru, When I received the government in 2001, the economy was in recession. High level of high inflation, high fiscal deficits. But the region as a whole have been growing at an average of 5%, and Peru have been growing between 7 and 9% for 13 years consecutively. That's what I say, average, despite there are outliers in some economies. If you look at the numbers, the international reserves have increased tremendously. Yes, we have had some 2 years that we were hit by the global financial crisis. Latin America was always characterized by being a continent that produced hyperinflation, very disordered, not very disciplined. We produced a lot of problems. That's what we were seeing. But let me tell you, this last financial crisis was not produced by Latin America. With all due respect. Exports have increased and it has diversified. The United States, it's our natural partner, although in relative terms, it has decreased. China, for good or for bad, is our main trade partner. With all its risk, let me share with you just one piece of data. The World Bank just came out. For each percentage point of GDP that falls in China, it has 2.5 points of adverse impact in Latin America. For each point of GDP that drops China, it has 2.5 points an adverse impact in Latin America, which tell us the level of vulnerability of a continent that depends only on natural resources. The exports. What worries me the most is that a great portion of our exports are commodities. You know, I think sometimes think that the region, we did not behave well and God got too angry at us. I don't know what we have done, but God punished us by putting in us too many natural resources in the continent. Now I understand why the Israelis and the Jews says that they are the chosen people. Because God decided to put no natural resources whatsoever. And they were forced to develop, to invest in the minds of the people and not depend on exogenous factors such as gold, silver, copper, oil, gas. And that's finite. Knowledge is not, unless they kill you. And so if you see that graphic, really most of it is natural resources. The line at the bottom of the manufacturing sector is very low. And that's a risk. This is one of the challenges. I say we have a unique opportunity, but this is one of the challenges. If we do not diversify the composition of economic growth, we might lose the train. It is very vulnerable to depend only on exporting natural resources with very little or no aggregate value. You know, it's accursed. Look at what we have. Oil. We represent 23% of the world's 250 trillion worth of crude oil reserves. Copper, look at 50% of the world's 22 trillion worth of copper reserves in the world. We have it. Silver. Gold. We have everything. The continent has 37% of the world's 5.6 quadrillion worth of fresh water in the world. Are we blessed or we have been punished? Look at agricultural production. 42% of the world's soybean production, Argentina. 54% of the world sugarcane production. 58% of the world's coffee production. 12% of the world wheat production. 18% of the world chicken production. 22% of cattle production. 6% of the world pork production. It doesn't worry me too much because I'm kosher. My friends, that is natural resources. The continent has close to 600 million people. And out of those 600 million people, 54 million Latin Americans are highly trained professionals who are in a diaspora in the world. If we have the capacity, if we have an state policy to recuperate the talent mixed with the natural resources, we can produce a synergy that really make the leap forward. My friends, the region has learned some lessons. We have made a lot of mistakes in the last 40 years. But we have learned some. We have learned to put our economic house in order. Central banks are independent, most of them. Inflation is controlled. We have diversified the sources of investment. We have diversified the destiny of our exports. We have shown that we can keep a sustained economic growth with the risk that I just pointed of dependent on commodity prices. And we have made some progress on electoral democracy on the average, taking into account the outliers. Inflation. Listen, I took some few countries. The countries of UNASUR and the other ones. Look at the curves. Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. Yes, of course, we were hit by the global financial crisis of 2008 or 2009. Mexico was hit much harder because it's much closer to the United States. That's a sort of a inverse Mexican hat. People, there are some what I call the Puma countries. Economic growth, inflation is controlled. People still believe that the best political system is democracy, independently of the fluctuations of the economy, on the average. Taking into account the outliers. However, we have natural resources and we have human capital that is in a diaspora in the world. The challenge is, number one, we need to invest in three things: quality of education, and quality of education. This is not a theoretical proposition from a Stanford University professor. I'm talking about my own life. Had it not been for an accident, I wouldn't have had the privilege to be in front of you, or had the privilege to conduct the destiny of my country. I understand, in the world of probabilities, there is an error margin. If you're generous, your error margin could be 5%, or if you're too demanding, 3%. Well, I'm the result of a statistical error. But I can assure you, I'm going to take advantage of that statistical error like nobody's business. But it's my responsibility. That's why I'm still an Indian enslaved, traveling the world sometimes without sleeping and putting together 23 former presidents of Latin America and 18 leaders of the world. Because if I'm the result of the statistical error, we are 7 billion people in the world. 240 are below the poverty line. I escape from the cruelty of extreme poverty. My responsibility is not to produce another statistical error, but rather to give the poor the right to have access to a good quality of education. And good quality of education is associated with nutrition, with health care of quality. I don't believe in giving fish away. That's cheap. Authoritarian populism. The poor does not want to extend the hand to receive a bread or give a fish for today. That's bread for today, hunger for tomorrow. The poor feel insulted when they give them fish away. They demand the right to learn how to fish, just to have the opportunity to learn how to fish. Friends, we need to invest in the social area. Let's convert the punishment, the curse of having too many natural resources. We can convert it into an opportunity if we are able to meet those challenges. Invest in the minds of our people and recuperate the brains, the human capital that is dispersed in the world. If we invest in science, technology, innovation, and we diversify the composition of economic growth, agro-industry, manufacturing, ecotourism, then we will be less vulnerable to exogenous factors that could happen if tomorrow China cools off or drops the GDP. We have in our hands, today more than ever, the possibility of making that leap forward and be a major player by the year 2050, just 37 years from now. This is the most promising continent there is today in the world. Yet, we have the challenge to eliminate poverty, and we have the challenge to reduce the inequality. We have enormous potential, natural resources, human capital, and yet we are the most unequal region in the whole wide world. We're not the poorest, but we are the most unequal continent in the world. I don't know any weapon more powerful in the world to kill poverty, to reduce inequality, than education. And not just education, quality of education. Just to show a little bit part of the challenges. Poverty and inequality. Democracy. My friends, you can see there how much progress we have made. Some countries more than others, but as a continent, we have made some progress. Except some countries, people alternate, are elected. However, the other challenges is how do we construct strong democratic institutions that are accountable to their citizens, clear rules of the game. Democracy is not circumscribed only to a day in which you have to vote. That's a very empty democracy. We need to deliver concrete, tangible, and measurable results in order for people not to lose faith in democracy. We need to put a content on it. You can see there who are the outliers. My friends, we have made progress. In comparison with 30 years ago, we went from militaries. We went from the boots to the votes in most countries. I admit there are some countries in which they take advantage of democracy. I want to be clear. They take advantage of democracy, they get elected, and once they get elected, they kidnap the institutions in order for them to create the environment for re-elections. We have part of the challenge that we have to deal with. But we have made progress. Let me summarize. We have natural resources. We have human capital. We need to invest more in the minds of our people to reduce poverty and inequality. We have to consolidate democratic institutions. We have the challenge not only to grow sustainably for a long period of time, but we have to meet the challenge of sustainable development, not just economic growth. Economic growth is a mean, it's not an end. If we don't redistribute better the benefits of growth, then people get angry. And you have noises in the streets. And you will hear the noises of the empty stomachs of the poor. My friends, the time is a critical variable. It is now. Now that we have the money that is derived from high prices of our commodities in the international market, this is the time to make the shift, to diversify the composition of growth and to invest in the minds of our people. This is the time. Let's convert it, this punishment, into an opportunity. We can do it. We need only to change the profile of the new leadership looking at the future. We can touch the future now by giving people the opportunity to be free. I am free thanks to education. I have chosen to accept this invitation because I'm free to choose. I could be somewhere else. I could stay under the trees of the Stanford University watching the deers and the squirrels. But I will be a very unhappy man because I have an enormous responsibility with my country and with my region. And because I believe in this unique opportunity that the region has to make a leap forward and be a major player in the world economy. Peru, Latin America as a whole, by the year 2050, could be developed region, meet the challenge of sustainable development, meet the challenge of environment, strong institutions that guarantee political, economic, social, legal stability, but also demand from the investors that they comply with their social and environmental responsibility. The time is now, and it's a responsibility of all 600 million people in Latin America. My last comment. We cannot any longer blame the United States for what we are not able to do it. We cannot blame the United States, but at the same time, we can demand that we sit at the table in a level round table and redefine the items of a new agenda of the relationship between Latin America and the United States. And we could examine the relationship of the United States and Latin America on the light of what's happening in Asia Pacific. My friends, I came to do it very quickly. I came over here about 2 hours ago. I got out of the plane from Lima, and I'm catching the plane to go to Stanford because I'm free thanks to education. From the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm open for questions.
Yes, sir. I will say I got to discover the beauty and the magnificence of your country. I lived there in the 60s, along with Colombia and Ecuador, and what I saw there in the 60s, I said, I can't believe the world hasn't discovered this place. It was magnificent. So everything you're talking about, natural resources, I felt that, and I've been saying that in some years since I first went there. But my question to you is, I heard here today that during your term as president, poverty was reduced by 25%. What did you do to change the mindset of the people in power to care about ending poverty?
You know, I wish I could be president now, because the economy is growing at 9%. I left it growing 7.5%, but when I received it, it was in recession. So I did not have enough money to implement what I'm recommending. However, I doubled the salaries of the teachers. The day that on my inauguration in the Congress of Peru, I announced the reduction of 22% of military spending to dedicated to education and health care. I know that the fruits, that investment is by definition medium and long term. You cannot see it. You don't get the claps or the popularity, you don't get it. Because investing in education and health care, science and technology, or reducing poverty, by definition, is medium and long term. And that's why I emphasize again, I get indignated when people give them fish away instead of teaching them or give them the opportunity to learn how to fish. I didn't have enough money. However, I implemented a program that was not any original part of me. Direct condition cash transfer for the extreme poor, particularly women. It was done in opportunities in Mexico, Bolsa Familia in Brazil, and we reduced extreme poverty from 24% to 18%. But women, each dollar that we invest in women, the rate of return is much higher than invested in men. I doubled the salaries of the judges and prosecutors with a naive notion that I can attract new people. That's part of the pending agenda. And I just came a few hours ago from Peru. I never had been so enthusiastic. I told the president, please don't touch the economy because I want to come back. And I want to invest it in the minds of our people. Today is the day. The prices are high. We have high reserves, a lot of money. We're growing between 7 and 9%. 13 years consecutive since I started in 2001. I wish I would be president now. Of course, I'm not any longer 40 years old. But let me tell you, to be big, you don't have to necessarily be tall. And I'm trying. Another question. Yes, here.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your great presentation. President Obama visited countries in Latin America, Mexico, and Costa Rica several weeks ago. Vice President Biden is now visiting Latin America. And in the coming week, Chinese President Xi Jinping is going to visit there too. So what's your reaction and comment on these visits by US and Chinese leaders? My second question is that how, in your view, how US and Latin America could cooperate to achieve the win-win situation, the same to China? Thank you.
I'm in the board of directors of some companies in China. And I'm glad they're doing well economically. I just wish they will be more democratic. I just wish that people that have different points of view can express it without being put in jail. That's my democratic side. The economic side is the reason why this Annenberg Commission makes a lot of sense. How can we put synergy, complementarities in our economy, Latin America, the United States, and the Asia Pacific? We don't have to fight who is the most powerful country in the world. How can we meet the challenge of 2.4 billion people who are living under poverty, who are not free? That is why I decided to accept when I was called. I had the privilege to be invited here. And I think it's an extraordinary idea. I know that there's a lot of competition. We are still the strongest economy, the more powerful country in the world. Well, it's true. This country has been strong, and it is still because of education, because human resources. I live now at Stanford, and you have the conversion of venture capital. A lot of money there. Research and development, Stanford University. Technology, Google and Facebook. Let me make this point related to your question. It is very profitable for business to invest in poverty and inequality reduction. I repeat, it is very profitable for business to reduce poverty and inequality, because that 2.4 billion is a wasted market. If they are incorporated in the production process, they will have a job, they will have an income, and they will buy what you produce: milk, cornflakes, juice, you Google, you Yahoo, whatever in the hell you produce. So look at it from the perspective of entrepreneurship, if you want. I look at it from the social justice point of view. I'm biased, and that's true. And I don't ask pardon to anyone for my bias. But look at it from the business perspective. 2.4 billion people, it's a huge market. You can do it. Another question. How do we distribute better the benefits of this impressive economic growth? That's our job. I saw a title in your program which says, Yankees stay in Latin America, something like that. But maybe we can share with us your technology. Maybe we can learn how to improve the quality of education. We don't have to make the same mistakes that all the people have done. We can learn from them. We can create an environment for investment in Latin America by having strong democratic institutions respecting the rules of the game. But at the same time, I repeat, demanding from the entrepreneurs to comply with their corporate, social, and environmental responsibility. What can we do together? We can fight narco traffic and insecurity in Latin America together. Watch it. Narco trafficking, organized crime, insecurity is not any longer a monopoly of Mexico. It has gone whole through Central America, has gone to South America. Look at Brazil. That we can do it together. And finally, if you ask me an honest answer to your question, let's treat ourselves with mutual respect, horizontal. I like an horizontal relationship. I mean, I'm talking about economics, I'm talking politics and some issues that we have in common. We have grown. We have learned our lessons. We have recuperated much faster from the global financial crisis of 2008 or 2009 than the European Union and the United States. We have learned. We have made a lot of mistakes. We have free trade agreements. Let's deal horizontally there. Don't try to protect your agricultural products. Let's put it on the table horizontally. We have a lot to learn from the United States, from their virtues and from their mistakes. Latin America needs to be integrated. But the true integration, the one that Bolívar really true meant the integration. I still don't understand what the hell is this, the socialism of the 21st century. Please, if somebody can help me to understand that, I would greatly appreciate it. Another question.
Mr. President, a personal question. We obviously feel how special your heart is this afternoon. Would you mind telling us about your beginning as a young man? What's so special about you that brought you here? Could you be a little bit more personal? And a tag-on question. Who is your favorite Central American author?
Central American author?
Author, writer.
I was born in the Andes at 5,000 meters above sea level in the Andes of Peru. I'm one of 16 brothers and sisters. 6 twins. I'm not a twin. I'm not a twin. Because of poverty, because we didn't have access to potable water and sanitation, 7 of my brothers and sisters died the first year of their life. And that's very typical of extreme poverty all over the world. 7. I'm number 8. I just barely made it. You want to get into the intimacy of my life? I have no problem. My parents migrated from the mountain to the coast, very typical during the 60s in Latin America. And I migrated to a port, Chimbote, a fishing port. So since the 8 or 5 years old, I was a shoeshine boy, and at the same time sold newspaper and lottery at night, and then during the day I went to school. Poor quality of school. That's what I say I'm the result of the statistical error. I met 2 Peace Corps volunteers. Now I'm the world ambassador for Peace Corps to try to recruit more members because they gave me a chance. They listened to this crazy guy who was very ambitious and was trying to do a lot of things. If I would have stayed in Peru, I wouldn't have had a chance to go to university. I became a newspaper writer at the age of 11 years old in Chimbote while I was shoeshining. These Peace Corps volunteers have played a very important role in shaping my life. I'm the only one out of all my brothers who went to high school, much less to university. I'm the only one who went to university. Another factor, I play professional soccer in the United States once I came to San Francisco. Not because I was a star, but the gringos were not too good. Then, today, they already have organized a World Cup, and women are playing better than men. So, USF is a Jesuit private university, very expensive. So, I financed with a soccer scholarship. I sold gasoline at the gas station of a Lebanese guy in Banes, in Fulton, in San Francisco. It was hell because in San Francisco at night it's very windy. And then that time when you sold the gasoline, you have to do the whole schmear. You have to check the gasoline, the oil, clean the windshield. There was not an automatic pump. You have to do it yourself. When I finished, there was one professor of Chinese descent, Mr. Wu, who was an advisor to President Nixon. I was his teaching assistant in economics. How did I get there? I don't know. And then I finished my BA and I said, I'm going home. I miss my ceviche and my pisco sour. He said, no, you have to continue. You have to apply to graduate school. And he insisted. And I said, what the hell? There was no computer there. You have to type it, your statement and purpose, by hand or by a typewriter. And typical Alejandro, shoot the moon. I applied to Harvard, to Yale, to Princeton, to Columbia, London School of Economics, to Wisconsin, and Stanford. And out of the 6, I was accepted in 5. The one who told me to go to hell was Wisconsin. But don't worry. 25 years later, they invited me to do the commencement speech at Wisconsin. And you can imagine how I started my speech. friends, that's more or less part of it. It was not enough to be accepted at those universities. It's how do you finance it? Because all of them are very expensive. So part of this statistical error is I met a Jewish professor, that's why I'm kosher, a Jewish professor who looked at me, we talked, and he bet on me. He said, come, I don't have the money. So don't worry, Ford Foundation. Got me my first scholarship. Now, in a few months, I'm getting into the board of directors of the Ford Foundation. My friends, that's part of my life. There is a book that I wrote that was the most difficult book that I wrote. It's called The Cards on the Table. I wrote it when I was a professor in Tokyo at the University of Waseda. Now, they're making a movie. You have seen the movie Pretty Woman, where the director is Arnavat. He is in charge of doing the book. But President Shimon Peres invited me to Jerusalem, and I met, once again, Arnavat, and he pulled me on the corner and he said, listen, I have a problem with the movie. What is it? I don't find any person as ugly as you to represent you. I said, that's your problem. Okay, that's part of my life. Another question.
President Toledo, what role do you see entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs having in addressing the problems of education in Latin America? And then are you involved in any initiatives with social entrepreneurship to address the problem?
Yes, it's very strong issue on me. When I went, in 1975, I went to China for the first time to give a lecture at the Science Academy. When I left after a week, I left convinced that in China, poverty was very equally distributed. I'm talking about 75. Now it has changed. What is my point? We need to stimulate investment to provide sustainability to economic growth. And that's why I say strong democratic institutions to guarantee legal stability. But at the same time, the state needs to demand that that entrepreneurship complies with the social and environmental responsibility. They cannot go to my rural community, get the gold, the silver, the copper, contaminate the water, the trees, and not share part of the benefits with the indigenous or Amazon community where the gold, the silver, or the copper is there. It's very important. My heart is my commitment for my life. I have decided to dedicate the rest of my life to the issue of poverty reduction and inequality. The rest of my life, the years that God gives me. Each one has his own craziness. This is mine. That's why I created this foundation with 23 former presidents from Latin America and 18 leaders of the world. But to distribute, we need to grow. To grow responsibly. That's why I meant on the title by saying inclusive growth. We need to grow because we cannot redistribute poverty. And we need to stimulate capital investment. I don't know anything more coward in the world than a dollar or a Chinese currency or a euro or a real from Brazil. They are going to go there where there is stability. But grow
is a mean, it's not an end. The ultimate state policy is to improve the quality of life of people. I'm dedicated to redraw the social face of Latin America and in my country, but I need to capture capital investment with these conditions of sustainable development and comply with the social and environmental responsibility. Another question. My friends, once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for giving me this privilege to address and share my thoughts with you. Please continue this task. It's a very important one. Thank you very much.